right, so that was just a fun little exercise that I have as part of my personal user manual, which is one of the things that we're going to be talking about today. Two of the tools that I like to use the most as we think about clarity and building connections on teams are personal user manuals and team agreements. So I'm curious if anyone has ever used either one of these tools before. Go ahead and shout out in the chat if you have. Excellent. So Connie hasn't, but like the idea. Cool. All right. So Lily, I'm gonna want to hear so much more about that. Not good.
It's a big thumbs down from Lillian. She's like, this is more trouble than it's worth. Is that what this is? Lillian, want to share?
Are you comfortable sharing?
It makes me hate people, and it could take us years.
Oh my gosh.
You know, L&D were such creative people and such dramatic people and outspoken, and you can't even think of the questions that are going to come up. Oh, it's horrifying. And it's like my main project right now, so I might die from this.
Oh, we'll talk about some things that
on your gravestone died.
You might want to think about that might help. We'll talk about those a little bit later. It can be tough, especially if you are leading it as part of the team. But we'll talk about that a little bit more.
I was going to say, just the teams that need it, I bet are all kinds of heck to put it together. They're not very friendly. They're not very nice about things. The teams that don't need it, you know, you could easily do one because it'd be no big deal.
Yeah. It's much easier for those, but I like to have external facilitators do it because it just makes it a little bit easier, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. So personal user manuals, let's start there. So personal user manuals are just that. They are an individual saying, here is how I work best. Here are some things that I think you need to know about me. And they generally have some of the things that you see on the screen in the body of them. So they might talk about communication. They could talk about working style, how I like to collaborate, strengths, opportunities, even how maybe I like to give or receive feedback. How I like to give or receive recognition. There really is no one right way, but the key here is it's an individual. So this is about me, my needs, how I work best, some things that you should know about me. We call them, user manuals because they're just that. They are the things that if somebody were to look at it, they'd be going, oh, okay, either one, that explains a lot, or two, here's some things I should be aware of. Now, one of the things you do need to know about personal user manuals is just like any user manual. I mean, I'll raise my hand. How many times have we taken a user manual and glanced at it and said, I don't need that? Yeah, I've ignored many user manuals, and I think many people here have. Yeah. So just because you create it doesn't mean you, will always get what you want. You do have to compromise because we all are coming from different areas and different needs. So we have to really think about, well, how can we compromise and what's negotiable for me and what isn't negotiable for me. But the other piece of this is, it is for you to give yourself clarity first. And the reason I say that is, how can you tell somebody or share with somebody what you need if you aren't clear about it yourself? Which is why I love to do personal user manuals, even if I don't share them with anybody. So that's kind of the beauty of it. And I like that you were sharing, Maureen, how I like to be managed. So it's a great thing when somebody new is coming on board, whether it's a new manager or whether it's a new employee. And we'll talk a little bit about how you might use them after we look at some examples. So, personal user manuals, here's, my thoughts, here's what I like, here's how I like to be managed, here's how I like to work. Team agreements, on the other hand, are the team coming together, making some decisions. And again, they can include things like communication. You'll often find, especially if the team is distributed, especially if they're distributed across time zones, you'll often find working hours on them. You might see meetings. How are we going to meet? The question that came in earlier, I think it was from Maureen, do you want webcams on or off? You'll often find that in a team agreement. What do we agree on? For the most part, webcams on, webcams off. You might also see things like connection opportunities. How are we, especially if we're distributed, how are we going to stay connected? With personal user manuals and team agreements, there is, and this is what kind of makes it complicated, as Lily was sharing earlier, there is no right or wrong way. There are hundreds, if not thousands of combinations that you could put together. You could spend a ton of time sitting and coming up with questions for either one of these. And then I see Shannon's eyes going, oh yeah, you could. And then you're just going to be spinning your wheels. And then people get really passionate about, no, I want this included. I want that included, which is why it's really great to start with some bare bones. We'll talk about what some of those bare bones are. And then if you want, you can expand past. But you could just get stuck in your own personal user manual. Oh, I'm going to add this. I'm going to add this before I share it with somebody. Team agreements. Oh, we have to talk about this. We have to talk about this. We have to talk about this. No, I want this. So that's the caution, because the beauty of them is that they are whatever you want to put in them. That's also the downside. So pluses and minuses in every one of these. And I was looking at some of the chats coming through. You know, you have to really think about what, and we'll talk about this, what is it that you're willing to share? What is it that you should share? A personal user manual doesn't have to include everything. However, it should include some things that, you know, maybe are nice to knows. And we'll talk a little bit about those. It'll be really interesting to see what you come up with a little bit later today. All right. So any questions about what personal user manuals are and team agreements from kind of a high level perspective before we start diving into personal user manuals?
I would ask, like, how frequently would you say we should kind of revisit and update our personal user manual?
Yeah, it depends. So what I like to do when I've used these in the past with teams is we would meet every 6 months with here's what's changed. So they don't have to be, they could be once a year, twice a year. For a personal user manual, I wouldn't do it any more frequently than that. But if you're updating them, I recommend it's a conversation with the team, and it's a great conversation to have. Hey, here's what's happening. Here's what's different. Here's what's changed. So it's another way for you to refresh and have a conversation with your manager or your team.
Yeah, I was just thinking, because I know in the original note that was sent out, it was like your car has a user manual, like what about us? But so I was also thinking in terms of with cars, we also have kind of like the recommended service record and service manual.
Oh,
Yeah, I
great
like that.
analogy.
Yeah, so that's why I was thinking, like, is there a recommended time? Is it like, you know, kind of like it's your 50,000 mile checkup. These are, you know, these are the things you really need to focus on, like if there was anything like that. So
Yeah,
and
it is really up to you, but I agree. It's to your point, Maureen, there are service notices and things like that. So this is a living document. It doesn't just go out there and stay out there and never get updated.
No, it sounds very interesting, and it's something that people don't do, and it probably would save a lot of time and create a lot of camaraderie if you were to take the time to do this, because it's like saying you are important to this team.
Mhm.
We want to
Oh,
know
great
this.
point.
So
Yeah.
I think this is great.
Yeah, it shows that you are seen if it's reviewed. So again, it's the caveat. Just because you put it out there doesn't mean it's going to get reviewed. And this is where it has to be intentional. So if you're doing this as a team, you do this, and then you want to make sure people take time to review it. But it also helps people to see you are seen. So especially if you use some of the information. So if Barbara puts on hers that Barbara cannot meet past 4 p.m., and I honor that. I said, Barbara, I know that you can't meet past 4 p.m. So what time today would work for you? That lets you know that I value you. I think you're important. I see you. So that can help with some of that too.
One of the things, although I've never had an actual personal user manual. I like that idea. But I have like a folder that I call profile, personal profile. Basically, it's the same thing. I just don't have it organized into a like some type of manual or anything. But I really like that idea because one, it helps me to go back and visit and help me feel more successful actually at times. The other morning, I was feeling really discouraged about just my abilities, my competencies. And yeah, I know I'm very experienced. I know that I'm, you know, I'm really strong in several areas. And by going back over my profile, I actually help strengthen that in me to go, yeah, I do have that. I know what I'm doing. It's okay. You know, the other way that I have used my profile in that is that to kind of share with someone, you know, who I am. And I like that part that it brings that camaraderie that Barbara was talking about. And there's one person on my team that I am still trying to get to know. I don't know him because we're all remote on at our company now, 100% remote, which I love. However, when I talk to him, I have anxiety because I don't know him, and I feel like I probably sound stupid or I sound whatever, you know, sometimes because I don't know him. And it would have helped to have some little composite of this is who he is and this is what he likes. That's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah. Great thought on that. I'm sure we've all been in that position, right, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, it ramps up the get to know you. And again, even if I just glance at it, I get a sense of who Connie is or who Barbara is or who Jason is. And a lot of it also has to do with style. You'll see mine's a little tongue in cheek because I'm just a little tongue in cheek. You know, I'm a little snarky, sassy. You know, I have a bunch of tiaras that I'm looking at sitting right next to my desk. So of course mine is going to be a little bit funky and interesting. But that also lets people know the type of person I am. And Maureen, to your point, you know, and that's why team agreements and user manuals can be really nice. They don't have to be that long, but if you do them at the start of a project, it can be a great way to lessen that ramp up time. I need to get to know you, but it also starts to build some trust between people because I get you. I see you. Oh, I didn't know you had a cat. I've got a cat, you know, and we can have conversations about cats.
Yeah. I'm actually getting ready to possibly hire somebody new onto my team. And this is just like, I need to send her, get this built for her. And, you know, this would be a great way to get somebody onboarded onto a team as well.
Exactly. It can be a great, so it can do two things. One, if you as a team have, even if you just have, and we'll talk about, even if you just have like 5 things, here are 5 things about Jason, here are 5 things about Connie. And then the new person gets to read all of those and then create their own, and they have a template and say, here's the 5 things you need to know about me. And then you can come to a meeting and instead of, all right, Barbara, tell us 5 things you need to know about you. Lily, tell us 5 things. You can spend that time going, you know, Jason, tell me a little bit more about, you wrote, I love soccer. Tell me a little bit more. What kind of teams? Things like that. So you can be a more productive introductory session instead of doing the same old, let's go around the room. Here's who we are. Here's where I came from. Do a little pre-read.
Right.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. And the team agreements is really the thing that I'd lean into because like you said, I don't like meetings after 4 o'clock. I don't like them before 9. So set those parameters.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, in my profession, I'm a parliamentarian. I help people with board meetings and conventions and membership meetings.
Yeah.
So I would say 3-4 nights a week is when my meetings happen.
Ooh.
So my meetings are all at night. Mornings like 9 to 12 is my time for myself to do what I want to do, like this seminar. Afternoons is when I get ready for my meetings. Now all my meetings are at night. So
yeah, and that's something to let people know, hey, the morning is my time for me. Like I would rather have meetings in the morning, certain times. Again, that's
when people want individual personal, you know, consultation, it's like any day, 9 to 12, I'm usually available. Nighttime, evenings, forget about it.
Yep. Yeah, so those are great things to know. So again, it just depends. Everybody's situation is different. So I'm not going to be calling Barbara for a meeting past, certain time because her meetings are booked already.